Welcome, everyone. We're here with another Meet Your Trainer segment. We have one of my friends and dear mentors, Jack Zwissig, with us. How you doing, Jack?
I'm well, John. So you can tell that we know each other. You pronounce my name properly.
Yes, yes, never can forget that name. So Jack is one of our all-star trainers for the upcoming Life Upgrade launch in late October, October 24 and 25. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to jump into that, Jack, and what you're looking forward to.
Okay, well, the simple answer of why I decided to jump in is because you asked. And I might not have had somebody else asked, but I have a lot of respect for you, and I think you've done a great job. And it's funny how memory works, but I'm sure there were difficult times when I was training you to be a trainer, and but I mostly remember great things. So I guess that's the good news. So that was my number one reason. But I certainly have become more and more passionate about it as we've gone through the process. I'm intrigued of having a mini reunion with people that were such a big part of my life and very meaningful to me. And but I suppose the bottom line is that we're all facing some really, let's just be frank about it, terrible circumstances in our lives. And at the very least, we're creating new habits of like the worst thing in the world, which is I spent so much of my life learning to get close to people, and now I, walk into the grocery store and stop and don't walk down an aisle because there's somebody there, and it's so weird. And I realize that it's really creating a lot of habits that we're going to have to break again. And so I see this as a way to interrupt that, and for people to stop and learn some things and feel some things, and hopefully interrupt some of the problems that we face. I read you a poem. Remember when I read that poem? Uh,
Yeah,
and this might be a better time to read it now than in the actual presentation. What do you think?
yeah, sure.
Okay, because what this poem's about, the situation, the circumstance. Well, now I am going to need the glasses. Part of aging.
No problem.
All right, so it's called Awakening. When I woke up this morning, I had a smile on my face. Still half asleep, the world offered lots to embrace. And then it happened. A dark cloud entered my mind. The joy of possibility was soon left behind. What should I do? What should I feel? Things are uncertain, confused, and surreal. How long will this last? How many will die? I feel so helpless, I just want to cry. This virus is insidious, it cannot be seen. In so many ways, life seems like a bad dream. Ideally, I'll get through another day, and just before bedtime, I will quietly pray. Lord, grant us health and strength and give us your grace, and let me wake up with a smile on my face. So, you know, it's kind of like that. I mean, it's there's so much that I see for myself and the few people that I do interact with, other than Zoom. We just have so many challenges right now, um, and so much division in our country and all kinds of stuff. And so, to me, I think it's a great opportunity to be with some pretty special people, and I think people will benefit from it. So
Yeah,
there's my
absolutely.
answer. That's why. Long answer to why I chose to be a part of it.
Yeah, that was wonderful. So let's go back to your beginnings in the world of transformation. I've known you since I can remember when I first even became familiar with what my dad was doing. I believe you had come out of school fairly soon, before you took the training. Timeline, and what did you think your career was going to be, and then what moved you to jump into transformation?
Again, good question. By the way, I think you were a young teenager when we first met. I mean, like you were, I don't know, 12, 13 in that range.
Yeah.
So I graduated from Santa Clara University, and I went and got my master's. So I got an MBA. I actually ended up with a dual focus, which was kind of weird, in both marketing and management. And I really saw myself, being a big time corporate executive. I went to work for a company called California Canners and Growers. And if you looked at my life from the outside, you would have thought, wow, this guy's doing pretty well. At 25 years old, I was national sales manager of a $250 million company. So I was on a very, very, very fast pace. And that's how I measured my life. And I'm going to do a little aside here for a second, because it tells part of this. I have a friend that's doing some executive coaching, and he's fairly new to it. So occasionally what he does is he sends me a questionnaire that I gave to him and says, what do you think about this? And I give him my input. And I got one that he sent to me. And I thought to myself, as I read this guy's questionnaire, there, but for the grace of God, I would have gone. Because I really, kind of felt sad reading this guy's questionnaire, because he's just totally fixed, and he's totally defined his life in, how much profit the company makes this year. I mean, that's who he is. And that's who I was. And, but I really, you hear this a lot, but I really wasn't happy deep inside. I mean, it looked okay. So here's what happened. So the other part is this. What I realized in this whole process is that I was really good at the corporate game. I was too good. And what I mean by that is I was becoming, like, we had at my company, we had 8 vice presidents, and of course they were all men. There was no spoken thing, but there were never any real promotions for women, and which didn't fit with me. That wasn't okay with me. And every night they all went to the World Trade Club and drank, and probably most of them were alcoholics, and what they talked about was cheating on their wives. And I thought, I'm becoming this. I'm telling myself I'm not going to be like them. But in fact, the more I was around it, the more I was becoming that. And so luckily, I got a phone call on a Sunday night. I mean, like at 11:30 on a Sunday night. And, this was weird. And it was a friend of mine, Lynn Partier. And she said, hi, Jack. I just called to tell you I love you and I think you're great. And then she hung up. And I thought, what the hell is this? What are you doing, hanging? So Lynn was always very adventurous. So I just thought, well, maybe full moon or something, who knows? The next day I get a call again, and it's Lynn, and she goes, I just called to tell you I think you're great and I love you. And I said, wait, don't hang up. Tell me what this is about. And she goes, well, since you asked. Well, who wouldn't ask? Really, I mean, who wouldn't ask at that moment in time? So she said, well, I did this training. It's called Lifespring. It's okay. And it's so great. And, you got to do it. And I said to her, well, Lynn, I don't need it. And I would have thought, like most people, I would have thought that would have stopped her. And she'd have said, okay, thanks, or tried to talk me in that I really did need it. But instead, Lynn said, I know. Isn't that great? That's why I'm calling you. I said, Lynn, that doesn't make any sense. You want me to do a training I don't need? And she said, yeah, it's really for people that don't need it. And so in her own little Lynn Partier way, she was telling me the old, what is a Maslow thing? Instead of having sick go to well, why don't we have well go to weller? And so she perceived me as well and wanted me to be weller. And so finally, she called every day. And I said to her, okay, I'm going to tell, I'll do this thing if you promise to never call me about this again. She said, okay. So I went in and sat there on Wednesday night like this with my arms folded, and I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking to myself, well, I know why these people are here. They need it. I don't need it, but look at these people. These people are messed up. Well, by Saturday night, I looked at a room full of people that in 4 short days I had grown to not only not to stop judging like that, but really care about. And more importantly, on Saturday night, I looked around at a room full of people hugging each other, which was not something that I was accustomed to doing. And I thought to myself, maybe this vision that I've kept secret all my life is possible. Maybe we can have a world where instead of separation, we really learn to be vulnerable with each other and have intimacy. So that was a pretty big deal. And then I went and did the advanced course, which we called IPE, which was a much stronger version. Because we didn't have any ending times, we'd go out and it'd be daylight. So I did that, and about halfway through the 3rd program, I said this, I'd been offered a job as a trainer, and I said, I'm going to do this, and I don't want to be that person I was in the corporate world anymore. By the way, don't get me wrong, I love the corporate world. Now that I'm a different person and not worried about becoming all that, I love working in the corporate world. To me, it's wonderful. 15 years at 20th Century Fox, I just enjoy it almost every day. And but anyway, so then I thought, well, I'll go to work for Lifespring for 2 years. And I guess, 18 years later, I said, okay, I am going to, what I really saw was I wanted to bring the two together. I wanted to find a way to have what I learned about business with my MBA and my years in the corporate world, and what I learned about people from being a trainer and all that stuff. And I wanted to bring them together. And so, and I think that thanks to people like Landon and Mike McKeon and John Thompson and John Webb, I think I was able to really learn to do that. And I love doing a thing called a high performance workshop. It's very experiential, although we can't do it anymore. It's, we have to do it on Zoom call, but it's a terrific, very experiential thing, different than most corporate PowerPoint presentations where they give you a t-shirt and a hat and say, here, just go, we're going to turn the lights down and get on your phone underneath the desk. So anyway, it's a long answer, but that's how I got involved, and like that. I also, I want to say about my time, you didn't really ask, but my time were in those years, I guess the biggest thing when, as a trainer, was I learned the difference between rich and richness. And the choices I made, fortunately, taught me about having richness in life. And it doesn't mean all up. I mean, there are lots and lots of sad moments. I heard a song. I ride a bike every day, and I listen to you're not supposed to, but I have headphones so I can hear cars and buds. And anyway, so I heard a song that I hadn't heard in years and years, and it was one that we used to play on Thursday morning of the advanced course. And it's a sad song, of course. And I remember just crying my eyes out. I mean, I'm not talking about, gently wiping away. I'm talking about catharsis, and the whole room would be crying, and I would be on the microphone screaming, "Let it go." And, I think I even said to your dad one day, I should pay you for letting me do these trainings. And he was willing to do that, by the way.
Yeah. Hey,
So
we're dying to know what that song was.
Don't Cry Out Loud by Melissa Manchester. We used to play that every Thursday morning, Don't Cry Out Loud, because of course everybody was trying to hold back, which is what we had been taught.
Yeah,
And
it's a classic.
and the, you know, the funny part is I'd get done with the training and I would just be totally cleansed. You know, I mean, I would, because we actually bought a machine which would clean out all the negative ions in the air, and we burn candles, because I'm telling you, people would burn these toxins. And I mean to tell you, and then of course they're feeling love, so they'd run up to say I love you with this breath that would stop a charging rhino at 100 yards. I mean, honest to God, it's, oh, please, you know, write it down. But, you know, really an amazing. And then the funny part is 2 days later on Saturday, you know, I'd have the opposite catharsis. My cheeks would actually hurt at the end of Saturdays from smiling and laughing from the celebration that we would do. So it was a very, very unique time in my life. And I guess the biggest thing is the two things I remember, there were so many special people. I just don't think there's anything else I could have done that I would have met so many people and known them so deeply. I mean, at the end of 5 days, you know, it's like unbelievable how close, you know, we would be. And I may knew very little about their actual life, but I knew a lot about them, and they knew a lot about me. And so I remember that. I really remember the people. And sometimes people say, do you remember me? And I kind of go, well, maybe, you know, but I remember lots. And the other thing I remember, which has to do with this thing that we're doing, that you initiated, is that we did it because we wanted to make a difference. And, you know, some people think I'm just bullshitting about that, but I'm not. We really got up every morning in our little naive way and thought to ourselves, how can we make this a better world today? And that drove us. And, you know, we'd go out and we'd work 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and think nothing of it. And of course, I was much younger then. And that's probably why the hair is gone now from those days. But, and then the only other thing that I would like people to know about those days is I also remember that, especially if I was on the road doing trainings, you know, I'd spend 5 days and I'd get incredibly close to these people. And then we would have a graduation and their families would come in and they would, in essence, leave me, which is really what we wanted to have happen, but it didn't feel very good. You know, in other words, I'd find myself back in the Holiday Inn crying my eyes out, feeling lonely beyond belief. And because I'd gotten so close in such a short period of time. And then now I'm back on United Airlines. So interesting times. Wouldn't trade it for the world. You know, I just was so lucky. And again, had some of these people that are going to be on this call, had the privilege of either training them, kind of like, you know, you and Peggy and like that, and Dan Tocchini, or being a part with them, you know, as we presented, like Webb and Royce. So,
yeah, it's it's going to be an incredible reunion for a lot of us. Now, you became masterful in basic training, as we called it, and advanced course as well, and then you also managed centers, and I believe you were the manager and possibly the most successful Lifespring center of all time. Can you tell us what that was like, and what was your guiding principle that allowed you to create such a raging participation at that time?
Okay, to a couple questions. Actually, I went from being advanced course trainer, IPE trainer, to both IPE trainer and manager in Los Angeles. There's plenty of debate about who was most successful. It was something I was good at. because I learned, it took me a while to learn, but once I did, it was a principle that I could apply on it again and again. So Los Angeles was hugely successful. I then took over San Francisco at a different time, and that was beyond belief successful. That's probably what you're referring to, because we did, well, LA, we did trainings of 390, which was very weird. That was more like us. We had to take breaks in this section of the room because there weren't enough bathrooms and stuff. But it was still valuable. I was amazed. And then San Francisco, we did, very well there. We even did pretty well in Washington, D.C. We managed to revive that. I think the biggest thing that I learned, there were two things that I think helped me be successful. One was, there's no formula to do this, so just do the best. I called your dad one time and I said, we're stuck. I must be in the way, and I quit. And he said to me, without hesitation, I might add, he said, so let me verify your address. And I said, why? And he says, well, I got to send you a case of Gerber's. You're such a little baby. And so, of course, that pissed me off. And I said, well, I'll show you. And so that was, there's no way, you just got to do the best you can. You just really have to just trust that what you're going to do is going to make a difference, and trust your motives and all that stuff. That was number one. But the real thing that I learned was, it's all about the staff. And if you have a great staff, you're going to look good. And if you don't have a great staff, you're not. And, at first I thought that the trick was to hire the right staff, that's a strategy. Like, I'm going to go find the perfect mate for myself. That's a doomed strategy. There's lots of them out there, and they're probably not going to be the perfect one. So instead, what I finally learned towards the end was, do the best you can in the hiring, but it's really up to you to develop them. And so that took a little while for me to learn how to do that. And, just like in a marriage or a relationship, it's not, I'm just going to go find Princess Charming. I'm going to find somebody, and then I'm going to have to work, and God, I hate that. So, but there it is. And so there were some unbelievable people that worked for me. I don't want to waste a lot of time with naming names and then leaving some names off, but just, people like Jim Hallam and Art Marshall and, like that. And I can, say them because they're both deceased, and I don't want to annoy anybody. So, but there were some amazing people that worked for me that I just, I looked at them and thought, because of you, I look good. And don't make any mistake. It's not fooling me. I'm not thinking I'm doing this. So it was easy to be humble.
I'm sure you created an abundant context, an expansive context, and people were able to move into that and bring their own vision to that. Now, I'm sure that's informed you as you work with the corporate world. And that's all about creating winning cultures and cultures that are aligned. So, what do you focus on when you're doing your corporate work?
Okay. By the way, great observation on your part. You must have been trained well. It really is about abundance. The centers that work are always created out of abundance. The ones that don't. Towards the end, the thing I disliked most about centers was they would say, how many enrollments are you going to get in the next 2 hours? That's just not abundant. Then it's all about you instead of out there to make a difference. And I'm not surprised that ended up being the demise of things, or a contributing factor. There's a couple things in the corporate world that I absolutely love. So one is culture change. Most companies think they know their culture, and they don't. Or they have a stated culture. When the pandemic first started, all these commercials came on. I know you don't watch commercials on TV, but there were lots of commercials that came on and told me how much they cared about me. Even PG&E told me they cared. They burned down Northern California, gave their CEO a bonus, and then care about me? I don't think so. So talk is cheap. And therefore, what I really love is when I can find an organization that's well and wants to be weller and understands that in today's world, if you're going to create a culture that's, especially now with the pandemic, you need to create a culture that is customer focused. It's no longer about manufacturing production focused. It needs to be, what are the needs out there? And by the way, in that, your employees need to be treated like customers too. You know, they're too often, it just, you know, the employees are expected to sacrifice for the good of the company. Well, yes, but it needs to be win-win. It needs to be, you know, I'm nurtured too. So I love working with culture. I love working with, one of the things I'm going to do, John, it looks like the bandwidth is low here, so I guess we're all right, because it's coming on different. So one of the things I'm going to talk about in the workshop that we're doing, the weekend we're doing, is creating either an individual or a corporate vision. And I don't, you know, that word has been overused, unfortunately, but what it means can never be overused. And so we're going to actually, I'm going to show people, I think my job is to offer practical things in this weekend. I know that there's, I've always seen it as a challenge in my life to take complicated things and communicate them in a simple way. And I think that if you can't do that, you didn't understand the complicated thing to begin with. And so that and visual. If you can't do a chart, then you must not understand it. So I'm not going to do charts, but I will do some PowerPoint. And in fact, you know, you and I have talked about it when I wrote the book that I wrote really for China. So it has that kind of an approach. But what I tried to do was make it as simple as possible. And, you know, I think if there's a criticism, somebody could say, well, it's simplistic. Well, it was intended to be. So because I think that, you know, then it's up to the reader or the listener to then take that simple concept and make it full and meaningful.
Well, yeah, and that's a fine art to take the complex and make it simple. So I think you did a fabulous job. Okay, well, let's come back to our event coming up soon. It sounds like you have a great plan for the segments that you're going to do. So what would you say to former graduates out there, or, you know, possibly even people who've never taken a training? What would you say by way of inviting them to come join us?
Yeah, so I don't think they need to be graduates. Certainly not on the sections I'm doing. You know, I never want it to be a prerequisite to if you're a graduate and you know this stuff, it'll be a great time for you to review it. And besides, a lot of times I think I know something, and then when I really stop and look, I really think that the biggest invitation I could say to people, anybody at any stage in life, is this is a great opportunity to stop the swirl. You know, it seems like we're in the middle of a tornado. And one of the things that I always do when I do executive coaching, which is I love doing, is get them to stop. Because if you don't interrupt what's happening, then you end up down the line and, you know, it just happened. And so I would say invest a weekend of time, and you really have very little to lose. And you know, we spend time, we waste time, and this is a chance to invest time.
Well, sounds like we have an incredible opportunity coming up. If anything that you've heard from Jack is intriguing to you or exciting to you, we humbly and excitedly invite you to join us on the 24th of October. And I can say that I've known Jack a really long time. And Jack, you made a point of being there when I did my first training, my first basic as solo. And that goes back 30 years, if you can believe it.
I
So
know. I remember it. I really do. I do.
we're we're still kicking 30 years later, and no end in sight. So I'm really pleased that you're a part of this with all of us, and I can't wait to experience it. I feel like we're all going to be students in this as well as presenters. And again, thank you so much for being a part of it, and thank you so much for your time today.
All right, John. Love you.
All right, love you, man.